What if the way you walk could tell you something about how well your brain and body are aging?
There is a degree of slowing down that happens as you age, but if you're noticing you're slowing down, then at the very least, just get it checked out to make sure it's part of aging. Don't make that judgment yourself.
I like to walk fairly quickly. I do a lot of walking. I also belong to a walking group on Wednesdays, but we walk at a walk and talk pace, which is kind of nice. So then you get to know other people and see what's going on.
New research is looking at a group of people over 80 who continue to walk at the pace of someone decades younger. Researchers call them super movers, and they may offer some important clues about healthy aging. For Louise, walking isn't just a way to get from one place to another. It's a way to experience the world.
I think you can see more when you're walking. Like if you're visiting a foreign country, if you're driving in a car, although or a bus, sometimes that works. But you're really up close and personal if you're walking. You don't miss the nuances.
Louise gets exercise, fresh air, and conversation at Unison at Kerby Centre river walks. While walking may look simple, it requires coordination between different systems. Unison TV talked with Dr. Joe Verghese about what science is telling us about walking speed and the brain.
People can improve their walking if they engage in regular exercise, whatever age you are. And you could improve how fast you walk, how long your strides are. And so all those factors are things that can be intervened.
It's great. It's great. It's mobility, especially as we age, it's so important.
With the term super movers. Now, it sounds like superheroes, but what exactly is a super mover?
Yeah, so super movers are a unique set of older individuals. So these are people who are 80 and older, but they walk with a walking speed of somebody who's 30 years younger. So the average walking speed is similar to somebody in their 50s or 60s. And anybody who reaches age 80 is exceptional in many ways because they've survived so long. But even among this group, this is an extra exceptional group.
What did this new research discover about people over 80 who continue to walk quickly?
So first of all, is not a common group. Among 80-year-olds, they account for anywhere between 4 to 8% of 80-year-olds. But this group seems to enjoy a number of benefits. Uh, they have a lower mortality rate than other 80-year-olds, so they die less frequently. They are healthier, they have less chronic illnesses, they take less medications. And in this most recent study that we described, we also found that this group had almost a 50% reduced risk of developing cognitive impairment compared to other 80-year-olds.
So, why are researchers so interested in walking speed? What does it tell us about our overall health? Why did you want to specifically study the speed of walking?
So walking speed is easily accessible. It's very easy to measure. You can do it at home. You can do it in a clinic setting. So it lends itself to be utilized in different settings. And it's a marker not only of brain health, it gives you a measure of what's happening with the rest of your body too. Because to walk properly, you obviously need a good brain. And as a neurologist, that's probably an area that I stress in my clinical and research. But also you need to have good heart. You need to have a good skeletal muscle system. Your joints have to work properly. So it's a reflection of everything that's going either well or bad with your body and brain.
Okay, so there is that connection. So, what parts of the brain then are involved in walking?
So the walking involves a distributed set of areas in the brain. So there are areas that are just concerned mostly with the motor aspect of walking. How do we move our limbs one foot in front of the other, or how do we swing the hands? But walking in the real world is much more complex than that. We not only have to focus on just putting one step in front of the other. We have to be aware of our environment around us, what's around us. Is there a step in the way? Is there a crack in the pavement? So it does engage different parts of the brain. And you need to see where you're going. So your visual areas get lit up. So walking engages different parts of the brain. But the most important parts probably are the parts that are involved in motor control and parts that are involved in executive function, your judgment, how fast you process information. So those are probably the most important parts that are associated with walking from a brain perspective.
Mm. Is walking speed simply a sign that someone is healthy, or could staying active actually help protect the brain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So walking definitely is a marker of what's happening in the brain. If you're walking fast, generally your brain health is good. If you're not, then much of our research is also focused on that aspect. It's a easy clinical indicator of something going off in the brain. So, for instance, we described a combination of symptoms. If you have somebody who's older, who has cognitive complaints and is walking slow, we call that combination motoric cognitive risk syndrome. So, people who have motoric cognitive risk syndrome are easily identifiable in a clinic setting, but they also are at increased risk of developing dementia. And on the flip side of it, there's been a number of recent exciting studies that have come out from Europe, from US, and most recently from Latin America that have shown that a combination of things, physical activity, mental activity, nutrition, taking care of your vascular risk factors, was associated with reducing cognitive decline in older adults. And in most of these studies, the physical exercise part included walking because it's just an easy way to get people to move and exercise. And it overcomes many of the barriers you have with other more complex exercise activities, and that you don't really need that much equipment. You can walk indoors or outdoors. And the general advice is that you should be engaging in moderate, for older adults, you should be engaging in moderate to severe intensity exercises for about 150 minutes a week. So roughly about 20, 30 minutes a day. And walking could be part of it. So what you should be aiming for is that you should be walking briskly. And that means that while walking, you should still be able to speak, but you might be a bit breathless doing it. So that, and obviously you need to do it in a very safe fashion. So if you have medical illnesses or other medical conditions, certainly get medical clearance before engaging in it. But in my experience, even if you have medical conditions, it's still possible to walk. You just have to do it within limits, and then gradually build yourself up so that you're gradually increasing the intensity of your exercise.
So how early can changes in walking speed signal that something might be happening in a person's brain?
In our studies, we have examined people 60 and older. And in this group, slowing of walking, or actual, when you see your geriatrician or neurologist, and if they observe certain patterns of walking abnormalities, that could signal an increased risk of developing dementia down the road. But other studies have shown that walking speed in midlife might also predict it. So at least from midlife onwards, we know that walking speed might be an indicator of what's going on. So in these studies, we generally compare walking speed to other people your age. So we're not comparing somebody who's 50 with somebody who's 80, but we're comparing it to other 50-year-olds. And so among other 50-year-olds, if your walking speed is slower, then that might be an indicator. But even better for individual people, I would advise if you notice there's been a change in your walking speed over the last couple of years, get it checked out. There might be a completely benign explanation. It just might be arthritis, or you just may probably need to learn how to walk better and faster. But don't ignore it if you've noticed that your walking speed has declined, or if somebody in your family or your doctor tells you that your walking speed is decreased, and especially if you're also noticing cognitive complaints along with it.
Well, how much of that then, before we, send people off to the doctor about this, or maybe there's nothing wrong with it, but how much should we expect as we get older for our speed to slow? Or should we? I'm not even sure if we should.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be a super mover, you'd hope that your walking speed remains high, but
Mhm.
there is a decline with aging because your joints get stiff and you do have a bit of slowing that happens. In studies generally, and it's difficult to do it on an individual basis, but if you decline by 10 or 20% of your speed, then that might be some reason for concern. Um, since it's so simple to do, I would recommend that with your annual checkup, along with your blood pressure and your pulse, maybe you should just get a gait speed done and see what the decline is, and then decide whether that might be within the 10 to 20% that's expected with aging, or is it more than
Mhm.
that?
That's an excellent thing to know. I never would have thought to check out my walking speed. Are there other factors that come along with walking speed? Because I'm a fast walker. My mom was a fast walker. I come from a long line of fast walkers, but I always thought that was a more personality thing, that we were somewhat anxious and needed to get some, like had to get stuff done, right? So how much of that is just the personality makeup, or
Yeah, definitely
yeah.
that is a factor. And,
Mhm.
you know, New Yorkers are famous for being fast walkers.
Mhm.
So, and in other parts of the country, they might walk
Mhm.
slow. That's
Mhm.
actually interesting. There have been
It's a
studies.
cultural thing, right? Walking space.
It definitely is
Mhm.
because there have been studies that have looked at walking speed across different countries, and there's a
Mhm.
great variability in how fast people walk and how fast
Mhm.
people walk in a city versus in a country setting. But when you're taking this down to an individual person, you're comparing yourself. So
Mhm.
if you were always a fast walker, but you've noticed that your walking is slowed down, then that's what I would go by, rather than comparing yourself to other people. Um, and people can improve their walking if they engage in regular exercise, whatever age you are. And you could improve the how fast you walk, how long your strides are. And so all those factors are things that can be intervened on. The Going back to our supermover study, the one interesting aspect about supermovers is, is this, like you said, something that's inherent and genetic, or is this something that you can actually aspire to? So from our studies, what we see is that supermovers always had a history of having a healthy lifestyle. So they exercise more, they were less sedentary, and as a result of that, they had less medical illnesses, they were taking less medication. So all of that probably were factors. Um, there might be a genetic biology component too, as well. When we looked at supermovers, their biological aging, not how old you are in years, but using biomarkers, understanding how old you should be, they were younger biologically compared to other 8-year-olds. So there could be a genetic factor at play. But as a clinician who sees older adults, I focus on the healthy lifestyle connection
Mhm.
because so for me, the message is that if you encourage people to have a healthy lifestyle, then
Mhm.
all of us can get to be super movers, at least close to that, and enjoy all the other benefits that come from being a super mover, which is reduced risk of mortality, less risk of dementia, and generally having a more quality of life at that age.
So can someone become a super mover in their 60s and 70s? Is there time to turn things around?
So the short answer is we don't know because we've only introduced this concept, but we don't believe that somebody just turned into a supermover when they became 80. They
Mhm.
must have been on that trajectory. And our earlier study actually shows that when we looked at supermovers and what their gait speeds were before they turned 80 in their 60s or 70s, they always seem to have higher gait speeds compared to the other 80-year-olds. So this benefit probably started many years ago. Which is not to say that if you reached 80 and you're walking and walking faster, that you can't improve your health. So people shouldn't stop thinking of exercising just because of their age. The earlier you start, like many of these healthy lifestyle variables, it's always better to start early, but it's never too late to start either.
That's good to hear. There's never an excuse to not do some kind of movement, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Even when we hear like, we're stiff or we have a wake up and we're sore. And some people I think tend to think I'm sore, I'm stiff, or I'm not well, so I need to rest. And is there truth to that, that being in that state means rest, or it means we need movement?
So generally, exercise is good if you have complaints like soreness or stiffness. You would think that exercise would actually make it worse, but actually many studies have shown that if you exercise regularly, you're less likely to be sore or stiff. And for an older adult, exercise just doesn't involve aerobic activities like walking or running. You also should have some balance training to prevent falls, and definitely strength training. As um, we start losing muscle in our 40s, and that continues. And if you don't actually engage in strength training, then you become weaker as you get older. And that, of course, affects your walking and makes you actually more stiff. So, having an exercise program that incorporates aerobic strength and balance elements is important.
Now, I just want to clarify something before I let you go. Now, does the research prove that walking faster protects the brain, or does it simply show an association?
Right now, what we're showing is an association.
Okay.
Walking is a marker of better brain health. And it might be mostly through a healthy lifestyle that lets you get to age 80 and become a super mover. We're in ongoing studies at Stony Brook University. We are trying to see if there's an underlying biology that we could intervene in. Because, like I said, the super movers only account for 4 to 8% of the 8-year-olds. So if it only applied to that 4 to 8%, then there's not much of a public health benefit. But what we believe is studying this exceptional group will give us insights either into exercise or lifestyle practices or unique biological pathways that would benefit the rest of us as well, and hopefully at younger ages, so that we can advise people by doing these kinds of activities or developing interventions that target specific biological pathways that we see in supermovers. We all can benefit from better health.
Or that we can create more super movers? Would that be
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
ultimate goal, is to have that percentage? Like, what did you say? It was like only 4%?
4 to 8, yeah.
Yeah, that we could create, 20% of the population
Absolutely.
eventually.
I think that
Is that
would be the aim. I wouldn't want everyone to be a super mover at age 80. I hope I'm a super mover at age 80. So that is a lofty goal, I know, but at
Mhm.
least I think you should aim high and then at least come up with ways that people can get there,
Mhm.
and then they can choose, options as to how they get there.
All right. And I noticed on your resume that you also have doing a study called GAIT as a uh, predictable marker of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I would love to talk to you about that either now or at another time. Do you have a few minutes to speak about that?
Yeah,
Or
sure. It's very closely related to
it
the
is. Hey, and
yeah.
that one's currently underway, right?
Right. So we set that study up at Stony Brook University about a year ago, and I believe this week we were enrolling our first patient.
Mm.
So there, we're continuing on some of the themes that I've studied for the last 20, 25 years, and we're definitely studying supermovers as part of that to get a better idea. So we're planning to recruit people who are 80 and older, who are both supermovers as well as non-supermovers, and doing a variety of tests, including blood tests to look for unique biomarkers, MRIs to look at what their brain looks like. And at our COMAC Research Center, we have a really unique setup. Probably one day, you can come there and take do a video of that. But we have a setup where we collect gait data when people walk on an instrumented walkway. That gives us an insight onto walking patterns. We get hundreds of gait variables. But we also, at the same time, are able to have a EEG setup that they wear that's mobile. So we can actually see through the EEG what's happening in the brain while these people are walking. So we do all these, and this is one of the few laboratories that's able to do that across the world and the country. We're also interested in the both sides, the good side, which is the super mover, but also understanding more about pathology that happens in the brain and how does that manifest in gait changes. So that is the focus of the grant, which is supported by the National Institutes of Health.
Okay, when you say gait, we're not talking necessarily speed, it's how we walk as well?
Absolutely, yes. So
Okay.
measuring how fast you walk, the speed or the
Mhm.
velocity is probably the easiest measure that we can
Mhm.
do, because to measure speed or velocity, all you need is, a fixed distance and a
Mhm.
stopwatch. But that is not necessarily in a laboratory setting the best marker of what we're trying to understand about the brain. So in
Mhm.
our laboratory settings, we do a more deeper dive into gait, for which means how long your strides are, how much time do you take to take one step? What is the difference between one step and the other, what we call variability, which turns out to be a powerful predictor of things like dementia, but also for other relevant outcomes in older adults like falls or disability. They turn out to be, in some ways, better predictors than gait speed. But but then in a clinic setting, you need these specialized equipment to do that. So
Mhm.
in a clinic setting, it's more practical just to measure gait speed or velocity, walking speed. Gait, we interchangeably
Mhm.
use the term gait and walking. But in a research setting, we can have a deeper dive into the different aspects of gait. And eventually, the idea, though, is that we can take all this and put it into a clinic setting. So, in recent advances in technology, a number of companies have come up with gait measures that you can do over a smartphone at home,
Mhm.
and they give you actually more measures than just the speed. They also give you these variability and stride length measures. So I think as gait speed becomes more incorporated into clinical practice, we'll see more of these measures being used.
Mhm.
And I think
I
all to the good, because it's such a simple measure and it gives you so
Mhm.
much information. It's going to be really helpful to both, to you as an individual, but also to your doctor to assess your health and help you guide you towards pathways that can prevent disability or dementia.
We're very fortunate we can measure so much. It seems like I'm measuring some part of me every not even waking hour. My sleep is measured, my movement is measured all the time on my watch, measuring everything for my health. And just one final thing, doctor. What would you say to someone who believes that slowing down is just an unavoidable part of getting older?
So there is a degree of slowing down that happens as you age, but if you're noticing you're slowing down, then at the very least, just get it checked out to make sure it's part of aging. Don't make that judgment yourself. In general, both as a patient or as a clinician, we are so insensitive to change. By the time we notice we are slowing down, we've actually slowed down significantly if you actually measure the change that is happening. So it's the same as your blood pressure. Your blood pressure one day might be slightly higher, so you don't have to really get excited over it, but you would continue monitoring it to make sure it's not a pattern. So the same with gait. It's not that just because you walk
Mhm.
slow, slightly slower. As a clinician, we would factor in things like what's your general health condition? How old are you? Where do you do your walking? Your cultural background, all of that. So we wouldn't go by just an absolute number and start intervening. It would be just one of, we would put it in context of all these other factors that I mentioned.
Wonderful. Just another reason to get out walking. It's doesn't cost you anything and it has the benefits of, getting some vitamin D, provided it's not too smoky. I don't know if it's smoky out where you are. We're not for sending you any of our smoke here from Canada.
Well, right now it's rainy where I am, so
Oh,
I think that's helped the smoke a little bit. But
all
yeah,
right.
absolutely, keep moving, and I think that's a good message.